when your day is as dim as it could be, when your night couldn't be any darker, and when your dreams are colorless. She comes in and flicks the lights on for you. When your mind is the most narrow, when your personality is the shallowest, she shares her deepest feelings with you. She holds up the mirror to you so you can see yourself when you'd rather not. And the thoughts that come out of her mouth, the ideas that she has, you wish you could see the world the way she does. You have a friend like that? Huh? Somebody who's original, inspiring, honest, and deep? Huh? I know somebody like that. Her name is Emily Dickinson. She lived for 55 years in the 1800s in New England, Amherst, Massachusetts. She was well educated because her father ran Amherst Prep School. She was well educated, not every woman was. And she had a lot of friends. She didn't see them. In those days, they corresponded. Like, if you had a friend and you were emailing back and forth. But they didn't just email 50 words, they would email long letters to each other. So she got to know a lot of people through her correspondence. She went out of Amherst maybe 3 or 4 times in her life. She went to Boston because she had an eye problem. She spent almost all her life in the environs of that particular area. And she became a recluse. The last 30 years of her life, she hardly left the home, was taking care of her family members. Now, I got to know her because of her poetry. Unlike me, she is a person of few words. So her poetry is sort of easy to understand. Now, some of her poems are just 4 lines. Less than 20 words. And so I'm going to hand you some of these so that you can follow me, because my wife contends that I'm not a very good reciter of poetry. I think she's true. Her poems are more like tweets, okay? 4 lines, less than 20 words. And in those days, however, in the old days, they used to be called aphorisms because they tried to contain some truth that would help us in our lives. This is one. To make routine a stimulus, remember it can cease. Capacity to terminate is a specific grace. So you do something every day, you have a simple habit, there's an activity that you have with a family member, take it away, then bring it back. And you realize how these good habits in your life actually help support who you are. They become part of your identity each day, like pledging allegiance to the flag at the beginning of a Toastmasters meeting. Take that away. She had a great sensitivity for others. Elysium, which is paradise, is as far as to the very nearest room, if in that room a friend await, felicity or doom. What fortitude the soul contains, that it can so endure, the accent of a coming foot, the opening of a door. Now, Elysium means paradise. Okay, so for us to be in Elysium means that part of us is divine. And according to Emily, I like to call her Emily because she's a friend, we're most divine when we use our soul. Well, how do we use our soul? We use our soul when the need of our friends requires it. When they've gotten a bad diagnosis, when they've gotten some bad news. Okay? That's our opportunity, not to bring our ordinary self to our friend, but that part of us which is special. One of the things poets do is they use metaphors, they use likenesses for something. One that she does, in one of her aphorisms, is she takes a scarf or an accessory and uses it as a metaphor for something profound like love. We outgrow love like other things and put it in a drawer. till it in antique fashion shows like costumes grandsires, that'd be grandparents, wore. Okay? Love. It goes out of style, right? When it goes out of style, we put it in a drawer. We put it away. She wants us to refute her statement here. She wants us to say, oh no, love isn't like that with me. I would never put away an old-fashioned. I would never treat it like an old-fashioned. Now, placing things in drawers, that reminds me of something else really important about Emily Dickinson. Only 5 of her poems were published in her lifetime. She dies, and her sister Lavinia is rummaging through her room and begins to open the bureau doors and finds thousands of her poems in the drawers. She was literally writing in anonymity. And she even says that these are the letters that she sent to the world who did not write to her. And so that's why I put these little pieces of poems in a paper clip. Because, of course, they didn't have paper clips in those days, and they didn't have keyboards, but that's how they found Emily's poems. About 5 years after her death, they published the entire volumes of her works, and she becomes really the female poet laureate of America for at least 100 years. Now, have you ever had a problem that seems insoluble? Emily knows how to look at it, put it in perspective. I felt a cleavage in my mind, as if my brain had split. I tried to match it, seam by seam, but could not make them fit. The thought behind I strove to join unto the thought before, but sequence raveled out of reach like balls upon the floor. Have you ever had a problem or an idea and you just can't reel it in? Okay, it's unraveling for you. You have had a situation in life, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. I can never put this back together. Well, she treats it as if it were a simple, homely metaphor. A seamstress can handle that. So maybe you can too. We know that Emily was a Christian, but she didn't practice any particular denomination, which was somewhat unconventional for the times. But she stated that she felt most in the presence of God when she was in nature. I'm just going to read part of this poem because I think it really shows you that to be a poem, you don't have to be always serious. I taste a liquor never brewed from tankards scooped in pearl. Not all the vats upon the Rhine yield such an alcohol. Inebriate of air am I, the debauchee of dew, reeling through endless summer days from ends of molten blue. That would be the sky. Till seraph swings their snowy hats and saints to windows run to see the little tippler leaning against the sun. God, I love that image, leaning against the sun. Wish I had thought of that. Wish I could do that. Now, we're not sure who Emily's first choice would have been. Her biographers say there were several men who would have qualified to be her lover. She knows about relationships. She sees that they were balancing acts, transactions requiring unconditional agreement. Now, my wife said, there's no way I could recite these 2 poems. It has to be recited by a female voice. So John is going to help me with these next 2 poems.
Thanks. I gave myself to him and took himself for pay. The solemn contract of a life was ratified this way. At least 'tis mutual risk, some found it mutual gain. Sweet debt of life each night to owe, insolvent every noon.
So life has a contract, but one that must be renewed. How often? Every day. Every day. Now here's one that surges with a really strong subliminal sensuality.
Wild nights, were I with thee, wild nights should be our luxury. Futile the winds to a heart in port, done with a compass, done with a chart. Rowing in Eden, ah, the sea, might I but moor tonight in thee.
Thank you. It's interesting that she writes these beautiful love poems in a time when almost all the writers were concerned with death and immortality. And she deals with that with the most ancient figure of speech that poets use, and that is the carriage held just but ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. Since then 'tis centuries, but each feels shorter than the day. I first surmised the horse's head were toward eternity. She's in a carriage, a funeral carriage. Her body is dead, she is still perceiving. What part of herself would be perceiving? Most likely her soul would still be perceiving. And she personifies, take the worst things or the most difficult things, and give them the attribute of a person that you know. And maybe that will help you deal with that as well. Now, Emily would say that after we die, it's just a place for do-overs. We get a second chance, we endeavor again. So then, this life is a prequel. And it's her simplicity that I think that is her greatest feature, because it makes you feel certain about what she's talking, that even though she says something that's not palpable, it still seems like it could be true. This world is not conclusion. A sequel stands beyond, invisible as music, but positive as song. If it's that simple, it must be true. The world is not conclusion. A sequel stands beyond. So I have a friend. She's always within arm's reach. Make a poet your friend. Thank you, Toastmasters.
Thank you for another wonderful, informative, deeply personal presentation. Truly, you did gift that speech to us. Emily Dickinson is a wonderful American poet, and it's so nice to have been reminded of her life and how proficient she was, or prolific, how many poems she left behind for us, and while how easy to understand on the surface, how much more there is in the depths. Vince, when you come up, it's always amazing how much breadth, how much meat that you put into those minutes that you're before us. Not only the history, the metaphors, the analogies, the historic reference to aphorisms and what they were trying to accomplish. It's such a wonderful learning experience. I just so enjoy it. I think they're very valuable to us all. Something I would suggest you consider, when you have those handouts, is perhaps having someone else manage them for you. I know I can get, Grace is not my middle name, and so when I'm trying to pass things out, remember what I'm saying, it's a little overwhelming sometimes. So perhaps that might be something to think about. I love when you present to us, you have a wonderful cadence, this beautiful honeyed voice. It just is warm and delicious to listen to. And it really helps in terms of understanding the sincerity that you're talking about your subject. It's a wonderful attribute. I would say it is a very successful speech. We were all introduced or reintroduced to Emily Dickinson. We were exposed to some of her poetry, and that was a wonderful thing. So thank you once again for that gift.